Star Wars, the politics continue. Are you surprised? Are you surprised that Star Wars has become a political thing? It is a big, grand political struggle. It is right up there with immigration and war and national health care plans. Yep, Star Wars is right up there. The politics are all throughout. Now we're talking Disney Star Wars here, the Disney Star Wars saga, if you will. And I wasn't going to make another video on what we can see on Rotten Tomatoes with the Rise of Skywalker. I wasn't going to make another video until we had reached 100,000 verified audience reviews. As you can see, we are only at 94,042 verified audience reviews as of, well, we're in January of 2020, and it just depends on when you're watching this as to what day. But let's just say January 19 of 2020. Audience score, 86%. That has been the same score since I've done my first video. In fact, it has held at 86% on the audience score since the very first few days of the movie's release. And there's a whole lot of conspiracy theory out there about why that might be. And there are also some rather well-reasoned rebuttals drowned out by a lot of the conspiracy nonsense about why statistically we would see this pretty much frozen or remaining at 86%. And that's not exactly going to be the topic here. The topic is, of course, politics, because just recently, we've had in the last couple of days a Washington Post article. As you can see here, the latest Star Wars film satisfies the right wing. Will the left start trolling? Now, this is by somebody that's written a few other articles on the Washington Post about Star Wars and politics, and that would be Bethany Lacina. And she is an associate professor of political science at the University of Rochester. And I'm just getting that from what she puts on her own byline in her Washington Post articles. And I have visited her website, which isn't hard to find, and she has 3 or 4 other articles pertaining to Star Wars or Disney's Star Wars, and how she thinks that it really is all about politics as far as whether or not you enjoyed the movie, or whether you're going to voice your opinion online in nice ways or not so nice ways. However, I have to say I completely disagree with her conclusions. Basically, to boil it down, she is saying that J.J. Abrams chose to move Star Wars to the conservative side, that he took it to the right politically in an effort to appease the Fandom Menace. The Fandom Menace, she claims, is a right-wing group or a conservative group or movement online, and that's her interpretation of the Fandom Menace. That is not what anybody in the Fandom Menace has ever told me in one of their videos or in one of their Twitter feeds or in any other form of social media. They have, in fact, a lot of them have just flat out refuted that. But even if that were true, if it were true, her assumption, her statement that the Fandom Menace is a right-wing group, then she's just logically failed in her own article here, because I'm sorry, I have yet to see one member, one self-proclaimed member of the Fandom Menace claiming that they thought the Rise of Skywalker was an improvement, that it was great, that it fixed the problem, so to speak, with Disney's version of Star Wars. In fact, it's quite the opposite. They really hate everything about it, and it's overwhelmingly so. The best you can say on Fandom Menace members is that some of them thought that it wasn't as bad as it could be, but none of them put it in a positive light, and they just basically ripped the film apart for a whole lot of flaws that have very little to do with politics. And in fact, they complained that the left-wing political points you could have gotten from The Last Jedi that they don't like, or even worse in The Rise of Skywalker. So that kind of refutes everything this woman is saying, this professor at this university is trying to say. She is saying that the right-wingers, the Fandom Menace, and their cohorts have been somehow appeased by this. No, I'm sorry, they have not been. So let's scroll down and just make sure I'm not crazy about what I think she is saying. She's saying that right-wing trolling of the film was mild compared to the backlash against TLJ, The Last Jedi. This latest movie avoided that ire by moving Star Wars politically right. First of all, it didn't avoid the ire. No. In fact, the Fandom Menace people considering themselves to be part of the Fandom Menace have been ripping this movie apart every chance they get. They've been responding to every ridiculous article and counter response out there just largely to get people to watch their videos, and they are continuing to say that this movie is just trash, it is garbage, it is irredeemable, it is more of the stuff they don't like. Yet this author of this article is claiming that it has appeased them by becoming more right-wing. But let's move on. So has Lucasfilm replaced its right-wing troll problem with a left-wing troll problem? Probably not. Compared to the previous film, The Rise of Skywalker slighted fans with less visibility in fandom media and fewer ways to monetize their criticisms. Well, her argument largely is that this Fandom Menace, this large chunk of fans that are very vocal online, they are largely comprised of adult white males and baby boomers, no less. And she claims that that's the bulk of who controls fan response online. It's white males, baby boomer age, and they're controlling everything, and then everybody else is just drowned out. Apparently, millennial opinion is drowned out. Apparently, according to her reasoning, you know, what she might call people of color, they're completely drowned out, and it's just all controlled by white males. And so she says there won't be much of any backlash from the left wing because the media, the fan responses, the YouTube videos, they're all just dominated by the right wingers. I have to say I completely disagree with that. There are plenty of left wingers on YouTube. There are more than even I want to stomach because I'm a little bit quite to the right side of the political spectrum. I wouldn't call myself an extremist, but I'm certainly not left-wing, and I consider myself right of center by my standards. So believe me when I tell you that there's quite a number of left-wing voices out there. Now, I agree with them. And I also disagree with them on their opinions on movies, not just on Star Wars, because it's not a political problem. You know, the problem with Star Wars, the Disney saga, is not a political problem. It's a problem with bad filmmaking. And again, I'm going to agree with a lot of the Fandom Menace who says the same exact thing. It's about bad filmmaking. It's not about politics. But according to this political science professor, it's all about politics. But of course it would be, because that's her job, to make everything all about politics. That's what she's supposed to do. So let's continue on. She calls it right-wing anger. After TLJ, an online campaign took issue with the film's feminism, leftism, and diverse casting. The right-wing critique was so durable that it has a nickname, the Fandom Menace, which even Lucasfilm uses. So the point here, I guess, is that she's saying that Lucasfilm has also identified this group of fans as the Fandom Menace. You know, the truth is that the term the Fandom Menace was basically created by somebody from the comic book world, if you will. This term came up with by a person known as Ethan Van Sciver, who is a comic book artist. He doesn't have anything to do with the production of Star Wars toys or movies or anything else. He doesn't run a Star Wars blog. He is straight up what you would call a Comicsgate. I don't know, maybe the founder of Comicsgate in a lot of ways. A group of people that have decided they need to they need to make their own version of comics. They want to make comic books separate of the main comic book industry. You would consider that main industry to be the big comic book companies like Marvel and DC. Well, comic skaters, they want to encourage independent creation of comic books, and that's their thing. Anyway, one of their big founding members, he actually came up with the term the Fandom Menace, and then other people just started using that term, and now it's everywhere. And there's even a Twitter account that you can visit that's called the Fandom Menace. It's very catchy. I mean, it's pretty much an ingenious play on words. It's very effective. It's very effective marketing, if you will. And Lucasfilm has been forced to identify them as the Fandom Menace. J.J. Abrams has even mentioned them in interviews. But according to her, Lucasfilm, identifying them by the Fandom Menace is somehow giving credibility to them. That's the way this reads to me. Now, I don't know if that's what she meant, but that's the way it comes across, and I'll have to disagree with that. There's no way in hell that Disney or Lucasfilm wanted to legitimize any Fandom Menace or any critiques of their material online from any direction. They simply want to make a profit on a movie. So, again, somebody that's a political science professor, whatever that means, is trying to make this a political thing. I disagree. Lucasfilm is not giving any legitimacy to anything called the Fandom Menace, but let's move on. Anger at TLJ, The Last Jedi, became a business. In a lot of ways on YouTube, it did. It was a big part of people getting views on YouTube, and why shouldn't they? If it wasn't going to be a controversy around Star Wars, then it would certainly be some kind of fan controversy over something else, another type of movie, because Star Wars is certainly not the only thing out there with fans that has a really passionate fan base that they want to fight with each other. People have been fighting over Star Wars since the internet, since 1999's The Phantom Menace came out. In fact, there are YouTube channels out there now with millions of viewers fighting each other right now over the worthiness of The Phantom Menace, a film from 1999, and they're attacking each other without mercy, and it has very little to do with anything in the Disney trilogy. So I'm just mentioning this because this is not new to just The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker and Walt Disney's trilogy. This has been going on since probably the beginning of Star Wars. It's just only the popularization of high-speed internet and social media has made this a thing, but it started in 1999, no question about that. Long before anybody, left or right, would argue that Star Wars should be political in some way. So let's move on. Who is this film for? Well, many observers see The Rise of Skywalker as an apology to The Last Jedi haters. Of the 53 The Rise of Skywalker reviews by top critics archived on Rotten Tomatoes as of January 15, 44 described the movie as a reversal intended to win over the fans that disliked TLJ. Well, going back to your critics' reviews, your tomato meter, you have 471 total reviews as of today, and 52% of them are saying that it's fresh, making this rotten. That's the way Rotten Tomatoes works. About half of these 471 critics like it, and about half say it's no good or that it's rotten. So she's going to say that 44 of them describe it as a reversal over The Last Jedi. Well, it definitely is. Just by going through plot points, you can see that J.J. Abrams meant to undo some of the things that Rian Johnson did in his movie. But that's not political. That's just simply listening to fan backlash, and everything that was reversed, none of this is your standard political stuff. They are story plot elements that have been reversed. For example, you had the return of Emperor Palpatine. Is somebody going to argue that Emperor Palpatine, last seen in the 2005 film Revenge of the Sith, is somehow a political figure in America? He's not. He never was. Whether he returned or whether he died in Return of the Jedi or he didn't die, that has no bearing on U.S. politics. So, and that's the biggest reversal. That's the biggest reversal that the Fandom Menace complains about. That that J.J. Abrams decided to go ahead and just pull Palpatine out of the hat. Like pulling the rabbit out of a hat. Um, a lot of people are just put off by that. In the Fandom Menace, a lot of people consider that just weak and stupid because they consider that it undoes everything that was accomplished in the first trilogy, that it undoes everything about Darth Vader's redemption, Anakin Skywalker's redemption, and that's why they don't like it, that Palpatine somehow survived in some form that's unexplained in the movie and is back to be the big bad villain again. They really don't like this, and that's not political at all. This is stuff that I don't even know how I could stretch this somehow to say it's political. And there were other things JJ reversed, small things. Some of them could be seen as direct digs at creative choices that Rian Johnson made. Maybe these two directors really do dislike each other's work or philosophy. Who knows? That's something for the behind the scenes stuff. But as far as the film goes, everything that was reversed, it's not political stuff that was reversed. So I don't see how that moves this to the right. In fact, the thing that the Fandom Menace complains about the most about the character of Rey being a Mary Sue, and that they see her, a lot of the Fandom Menace sees this as politics, in that Rian Johnson and maybe also J.J. Abrams, because he's the one that started the whole saga with Rey. Basically, she's a Mary Sue, and they consider that this was supposed to be because it's a feminine power move politically. It has something to do with, our current feminist intersectional movement. And we got more of that in The Rise of Skywalker. In fact, The Rise of Skywalker made her more of the Mary Sue. It drove the point home. I mean, if you watched The Last Jedi and you had watched The Phantom Menace and you watched The Last Jedi and you were suspecting that Rey was a Mary Sue, or you were entertaining and you weren't sure, when you saw The Rise of Skywalker, 100% yes, JJ made her a Mary Sue. That's what he intended from the beginning. Now, that's a filmmaking and a story problem. That's not a political thing, because that's not moving anything to the right. In fact, Rey has even more power than she did in The Last Jedi. She's able to actually grab ships out of the sky and pull them down and keep them from escaping into orbit, despite the fact their engines are firing. She's pretty much got God mode powers now. But somehow this political science professor out there wants to say that this is more to the right, that this is reversing what came before. I'm sorry, but it's not. It's actually more to the left if you want to see a Mary Sue character as being some kind of left-wing political statement on feminism. This is actually more of that, not less of that. So this whole thing about who is this film made for, somebody that's a political science professor wants to think that it's all about politics. Nope, nothing out there has shown me that. It's all about failed story writing, and it's about one director desperate to try to save a franchise because the director that preceded him ended all the decent story threads that he had set up. Not much politics there, unless you want to get into the politics at Disney, maybe people arguing in boardrooms and threatening each other with lawsuits and whatnot. That's a type of politics, but not the left-right politics that this author is talking about. Let's see, what else does she say? The Rise of Skywalker invites the perception that it is made with conservative white and male audiences in mind. Really, again, I have to disagree. Your main character is a Mary Sue, yes, a white female, but a female who's got even more godlike, unexplained powers than she had before. And she's the one that survives at the end. In fact, she takes over not only Luke Skywalker's name, but she also takes over his family farm at the end. And it's just her looking off into the twin sunset like Luke Skywalker did before. I'm sorry, but that's completely counter to what this lady is arguing in this article. She's seeing a whole lot of stuff that just isn't there. She's talking about, there were two women that kissed briefly, but it was only put into the film in a way in which it could have been cut out for overseas audiences in China and in Arab countries and whatnot. And yeah, that's because Disney is a, it's a PG company. It is, well, actually a PG-13 company, if you will. They've already stated they don't want to make R-rated movies, at least not that they want to put on their streaming service. They don't want to make R-rated Star Wars. So it's going to be pretty difficult to put any type of gay stuff into Star Wars in a way that's going to please the intersectional people, because you have to still produce a PG movie and you have to explain to kids, well, why is this overt stuff being put in there? It was never going to work. So anybody that has a fantasy, political or otherwise, that Disney movies are going to somehow make statements on gay politics, I'm sorry, but you're just crazy if you think that's what's going to happen. They've already stated Disney streaming is going to be PG and PG-13 at the most. They have no plans to start making R-rated Star Wars content. They're not bringing Quentin Tarantino in to do Star Wars, despite rumors about him doing Star Trek that didn't pan out. They're not bringing in R-rated directors to do this stuff. So there's a whole lot of stretching. Remember, you're talking about PG films and you're trying to put all this weird political stuff into it. I just can't take that seriously. She's saying that white males fear Rey as, they also feared not only Rey, but they feared the character of Rose Tico. And that she's saying that removing Rose Tico as a visible character in The Rise of Skywalker is also moving this to the right. No, getting rid of an unlikable character. It's the same thing that happened with George Lucas's prequel trilogy. He brought in Jar Jar Binks, who was supposed to be the key to everything in his own words. He said Jar Jar Binks is the key to everything. Well, the fans said, I don't think so, and they gave George Lucas the big middle finger. And what did he do? He made Jar Jar Binks a sideline character and made him pretty much just very small cameo appearances in the next two films, because he was responding to the fan backlash. And in my opinion, Jar Jar Binks was a mistake. And when he saw that the fans really hated it, he took him away from front and center, and he was supposed to remain front and center. This is the same thing. J.J. Abrams said, well, Rose Tico is not a popular character. Her action merchandise, her action figures and whatnot don't sell worth a crap at the stores, and etc. So, yeah, it just only made sense to sideline her. But again, that has nothing to do with politics, unless you're going to say also that Lucas taking away Jar Jar Binks was somehow a political thing. Was Jar Jar Binks left-wing too? And he had to be sidelined to appease the right-wingers? I'm sorry, it just doesn't work for me. Fans who feel slighted by the Rise of Skywalker's politics will not have a comparable platform. This is more of that argument that female, non-white, and LGBTQ fans control fewer fan outlets. Well, first off, if you're talking about YouTube, you know who controls people's YouTube videos? The people making those videos. So I'll have to disagree on her assessment, because there are plenty of people making left-wing content, way radical left-wing content for YouTube videos. They're not shy about doing it. They're doing it. I don't like to see it. I'm not a fan of it, but there are plenty of people that are, because a lot of them have millions of viewers. And so I'll have to disagree on that. If you want to take control of the content of like a YouTube channel and talk about how Star Wars should be left-wing and etc., and make points on that, there's nobody out there stopping you. You're free to do that. You're also free to do it on BitChute, and you're free to do it on Twitter. So this idea that somehow right-wingers have taken control of YouTube, really? Are you talking about Google, the company owned by Alphabet? If anything, their politics are well known. They skew far to the left side, so let's just leave it at that. That's why I don't believe any of that nonsense. TLJ and the right-wing media. Right-wing anti-TLJ content was helped along by non-Star Wars media as well. She doesn't listen, well, she says by Ben Shapiro and Jack Posobiec. See, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing his name right. Again, I skew more to the right, but I know who Ben Shapiro is only marginally. I don't watch his videos. Who Jack Posobiec is, I'm not exactly sure. In fact, I don't know who he is. So just like lumping everybody in that's right, or what she might call the right wing, together is also a big mistake, because how come I don't know who the hell Jack Posobiec is? And I'm quite to the right side of the political spectrum. So this is just somebody that's, spends a lot of time in a university writing things and has to find political angles on everything. And of course, she skews to the left. There's no question about that. She very much would probably fit the mold of some of those professors you saw trotted out in the impeachment hearings, where they didn't have any evidence to offer. They just wanted to rant and rave about how they don't like Trump. And I could see her fitting right in with that crowd. I don't know if that's the case, but in my opinion, I would say it probably is. And so I can say that she's probably skews to the left, just like all her associates at Rochester University. And she has to find some right-wing boogeyman in all of this. But again, let's look at the real boogeyman. 52% on the tomato meter. Let's see what they say. Are they going to tell me political things? Well, let's see. Let's just look at the rotten ones. You sense in this film, J.J. Abrams shrinking that world. Everything in this franchise feels like a take back. Well, they're saying, yeah, he's reversing things. But again, no mention of politics there. That's strange. You would think if politics were a thing, they would just put that right in their front paragraph, but let's read on. When we meet up with brash pilot Poe, he's light speed skipping his way out of trouble, and Abrams is in much the same mode, whisking you from one thing to the next before you have much time to think or feel anything in response. Well, that's pretty easy to read. It's a common criticism of The Rise of Skywalker that J.J. Abrams has such a horrendously fast pace going on that you can barely catch your breath. Yeah, I'm going to say that's true, because that's what I've been told over and over and over again by many fans that have left their opinions. And here's a critic saying the same thing. Again, nothing political in that. Are you going to say that the pacing of the movie is somehow political too? But let's move on. The hermetic logic of the plot is as impeccable as it is ridiculous. So they're talking about plot logic here. It's a drama crafted with robotic insularity for the consumption of viewers, being rendered robotic at each moment of the soullessly uniform spectacle. Well, that's a whole lot of word salad, but there's nothing political in there. That's for damn sure. Let's read on. A good explosion and spaceship-filled time at the cinema, but instead of a brave new direction, it was the same old stuff recycled. Ah, well, still better than episode 1. Well, there's a dig at the Fandom Menace. Like I said, that's still playing out, and it has been since 1999, and it's quite vicious. But again, nothing political there. You're talking about the same old stuff being recycled, and yeah, that's what it is. Like, you could see it in the trailers for Rise of Skywalker. It is definitely more of Star Wars, right? Let's read on. The changing of Rey's origins really hinders the kind of epic conclusion this could have been. Well, that's not political, but they're saying they don't like that Rey was a Palpatine, whereas in the previous film, Rian Johnson said in his story that Rey was nobody. Then it turns out she's the daughter or granddaughter of Palpatine. Okay, there's still nothing political there, so let's read on. It turns out there isn't new darkness or new light, just the same old battle on franchise repeat. The galaxy is saved once again by a lone hero who has finally learned her rightful place in a very closed circle. Yeah, and there's nothing political there. Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker is 2 hours and 21 minutes of exposition dialogues explain in excruciating detail everything someone or some group does just before they do it. Yeah, I've heard that complaint a lot from audience members too, that everybody's setting things up and explaining everything, and then it's resolved, and then you just jump to the next thing, and it keeps happening over and over. Again, nothing political there. Nothing political there. But let's actually look at IMDb. And on IMDb, we have a 6.9 out of 10, making it still not rotten. Remember that on Rotten Tomatoes, that would still not be rotten. That would be considered a fresh audience score. That would be a 69%, right? So it's not too far from rotten, but it's not rotten. So that's saying that it's a middle of the road type film. That's what 6.9 and 10 on IMDb means. This is in the middle of the road, maybe a little above that, but it's not fantastic, but it's not bad. Okay, let's move down. Let's see actual audience reviews. I don't know how far we're going to have to scroll, but yeah, let's see. We have, see all 6,900 or 6,393 user reviews. So we'll click on that, see how long that takes to load. Oh, surprise, surprise. Yeah, we've got 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10. Okay, 3 out of 10, Disney ruined Star Wars. Well, we're here to just refute the political angle, so let's just see the people that rated it really highly, if any of them talk about anything political. Well, here's 5 out of 10. What kind of Star Wars fan are you? For me, Star Wars has always been about good storytelling. The original trilogy had a simple but strong and surprising story. The prequels had their faults, but they still told a great story about how evil could rise to power under the nose of the good guys. This story in the Rise of Skywalker is not existing. It's just chaos, people running around and doing stuff in a pace which seems to be an attempt to hide an incredible high amount of plot holes and inconsistencies. Yeah, I don't see anything about politics there. Do you guys? I don't see anything, but let's continue on. 5 out of 10. How corporate greed and consumerism once again destroyed the filmmaking. I can get on board with that. Nothing political there, though. Let's see, is there anything above a 5-star? You know, you're seeing a lot of really rotten ones, and you notice that on Rotten Tomatoes, it takes me a lot longer to find these type of reviews, and they're very much shorter, and they're very much buried in pages of 4 and 5-star reviews. But for some reason on IMDb, I'm just bombarded with negative reviews on the whole front page. But I'm going to continue to load more. I want to actually find good ones and see if it's not looking good, you know. I'm just seeing negative ones, negative ones, negative ones. 9 out of 10. From one Star Wars fan to another. Let's see what I can see. Okay, let's see if we find politics in this 9 out of 10 review on IMDb. There are 2 ways to watch this film. You can read the negative reviews and go in the theater with preconceived notions, or what I would suggest, go into the theater with an open mind. The choice is yours. Honestly, it took some time for me to get into the story of this film. I tried getting in the zone, but it didn't seem to click. But then around 30-ish minutes into the movie, it clicked. I'm not saying that the first half hour was bad. I'm simply saying it was hard to grasp at first. The cinematography was beautiful. The score by John Williams was beautiful, and the story was incredible. It might take time to get in the zone, but when you arrive, okay. Let's see. The story is so complex, it will take a while. Emperor Palpatine from the Phantom Menace is the embodiment of the dark side. Okay, they like that. But Rey wasn't in the originals or the sequels, so why does she and Ben get to defeat the Emperor? Rey was created by Palpatine. She's his granddaughter. Ben was the son of Leia, who was the son of Anakin, who was created by Palpatine. So in the end, Palpatine was defeated by his own corruption. Good always wins. Okay. Cameos, there were good ones. Harrison Ford, blah, blah, blah. I liked the movie. There were certainly things I didn't like about it, but the thing that tied everything together was the score. So this guy's saying he really liked the score. It felt like the old Star Wars. He appreciated the cameos. It was fast-paced, but once he got used to it, he really loved it. Again, nothing political there, right? But let's go back to audience reviews. We can also make this a little foray into rotten reviews, right? And we have one from 17 hours ago. Verified. In fact, I'll just click on verified to make sure we're looking at nothing but verified reviews. 18 hours ago. Great special effects and some answers to long-standing questions. Let's see, I can look at one that's only 2.5 stars. 2 fumbled balls to name. As a standalone film, their action, then actual story explained. As the finale of finales, The Rise of Skywalker doesn't stick the landing. Really bad English, but they're saying it wasn't that great to them. Shoehorned in plot points. All relationships felt forced. Disappointing ending to a disappointing reboot. Yeah, but what about the politics? Wasn't it saved by moving to the right wing? I mean, that's what this professor told me. But let's move on. 5 stars. It was a good movie. Mm-hmm. 5 stars, totally awesome, excellent finale to a successful series of epic films. Well, this person, now listen to this. Excellent finale to a successful series of epic films. So they're saying the whole trilogy was epic. So if this moved politically to a different direction than The Last Jedi, according to this professor, how come they don't mention that the other ones didn't jive with this? They're saying the whole thing was epic. Could it be that not everybody sees this politically? Not everybody has to find some left wing or right wing talking point in this thing. It's just entertainment. 5 stars. Star Wars never disappoints. A great next chapter of the story of Rey, Finn, Kylo Ren, Leia, Chewbacca, and Poe. Nice surprise bringing back Lando, and an awesome story to the end. Definitely going to buy. So they're saying they're going to buy it on Blu-ray or DVD when it comes out. Well, Disney loves to hear that. I'm not going to read through all of those, but I'm just going to say I have yet to see anything political. And I see a whole lot of people talking it up, and I don't agree with a lot of those people. I think that I would be more finding myself agreeing with the Fandom Menace, and that this is really a very disappointing film, and it just makes you wonder why Disney went into this whole thing with no plan. You had directors fighting each other, and seemingly nobody knew how this thing was going to go, and everybody just acts like everything's all fine while it all goes to shit. That's my opinion, and that's the opinion of a lot of people in the so-called Fandom Menace. But according to this professor, that's a right-wing group. And, the Fandom Menace was pleased by this. In fact, the backlash ends. She's saying the backlash is over because the right wing has been placated. I'm sorry, but I think she's full of shit. That's what I'm saying. And we can look at the comments. Let's take a look at comments here. Comments on her actual article to see what happens here, right? 1 hour ago. Oh, or maybe TLJ was a pathetic movie that broke all the rules of the Star Wars universe. The suicide run on Snoke's ship, cheap thrills, had totally pointless subplots, the casino escapade, and introduced such memorable nonsense as Mary Poppins in space with Leia. The movie stunk too, by the way. I think the author sees right-wing images in her dreams. Sad. Yeah, I could agree with that. She has to see right-wing stuff in this, because if she does not, if she actually tries to write a critique of Star Wars that does not see some type of right-wing plot, whether it's the Fandom Menace or whoever else she can find out there, then her colleagues, her very much woke left-wing colleagues at Rochester University, they're going to have some stern words with her, or at the very least, she's not going to be invited to their next cocktail party or get-together at one of their quite elaborate home get-togethers, I would imagine. She's going to be drinking box wine home alone. She's not going to be drinking the good stuff with her friends from work. So yeah, she's got to find some right-wing plot. That's what she does. But let's read on. 2 hours ago, the new trilogy, but in particular TLJ, is hated because it challenged many people's values and worldviews. People have a lot of prejudices, not only about gender and race, but about many other things. Most of our prejudices are in our subconscious and not even us knowing them ourselves. Well, you might want to fix your English before you fancy yourself as some kind of psychology professor, but let's move on. Most of our, these belong neither to the left nor to the right. In the past, fandoms were stronger, but right now, anti-fandoms are overcoming fandoms on social media. First of all, fandoms are fandoms. Like, just because let's say you like certain Star Wars movies, you love them so much, you collect the action figures and you talk them up and you obsess over them and you go on forums and chat them up, and but then there are other movies that you don't like and you really hate those films and you don't like what the characters did and you're really disgusted by how the director did this or that, and you really don't like the actor that was in the movie. These are all fan opinions. These are all fandom. If you hate the films too, you're also part of the fandom, because the same people in the Fandom Menace that could say they hated The Last Jedi, their walls have all these Star Wars action figures on them from other films. So I'll have to disagree with you. There's no fandom and anti-fandom. Anti-fandom would be the corporate board at Disney. Those would be the only anti-fans you might have. Some of those people might be off-put by how seriously they take the movies, that the fans take the movies, but there's no anti-fandom out in the real world. They're just fans. There are fans fighting each other. They've been fighting each other since 1999 and earlier, and they still continue to do so. They are right now, there's a lot of them fighting each other over the validity of the Phantom Menace. There are people insulting people's YouTube channels over this right now as I speak in January of 2020, and that's a movie from 1999. So, no, but let's move on. Nowadays, people have more pleasure in hating something than liking something. Well, that's the internet. The internet, there's a whole movement of just about, people raging about all kinds of things, and yeah, it's an emotion, right? I mean, love and hate are the opposite things, but they're not really the opposite things, are they? Love and hate are almost the same thing in different forms. Um, that's why they say that love and apathy are actually the opposites, the proper opposites. So hating something and loving it, well, those are almost the same thing. You're passionate about something. But let's move on. Of course, anti-fandoms can use misogynist and racist arguments, but their main goal is to create anti-fans. I don't think they are trying to get people to join political parties, but rather to unite them in an anti-fandom that has fun, accusing, and diminishing its object of hate and all that surrounds that hate. Well, kind of, but you're reading too much into it. Yes, there are people that like attention, and they're getting that attention and that commercial success with that attention on not liking certain things, but being a fan, but really hating certain aspects of being a fan. They're still fans, though. I mean, even the most hardcore haters of The Last Jedi out there, they would all say they're Star Wars fans, and they would also say they hardcore hate The Last Jedi and everything about it. They're still fans. They're not anti-fans. Anti-fans would be people trying to shut their channels down and replace them with documentaries on the making of Star Wars. That's what the anti-fans would really be doing. So I completely disagree. People aren't really trying to tear people down. They're just trying to experience emotion. They're trying to make money. They're trying to get clicks. But there aren't really anti-fans out there. Anti-fans wouldn't be on YouTube. They would be making yet another boring documentary about the life of George Lucas. That would be an anti-fan. Let's see. Here's one from 22 hours ago. Also, while talking about white men so much, you obtusely omit respected pillars of the Phantom Menace, the Fandom Menace, like that Star Wars girl or Mindless Entertainment. Both with a huge number of subscribers, but they don't fit your narrative, do they? This is one of the most dishonest pieces of anti-fan propaganda you've let loose with yet. You should be ashamed. Well, she has to find the right-wing boogeyman here. She has to. Otherwise, she couldn't write about Star Wars. She would have to pick a different movie. Like, she would have to pick Terminator and, find the right-wing menace there. It has to be found because that's her job. That's how she gets her and keeps her tenure, if that's what she has. That's how she keeps her social circle and her, her status at the university, by finding the right-wing menace. That's what these people do. The author is a moron. Would like me point out the conjecture in your rant, or should I list all the points you're just parroting from others who have done the same thing for 18 months? I challenge you to post a direct link to anything that absolutely confirms the reason KMT bailed on social media. Yeah, they're disputing this whole... There's a story out there that Kelly Marie Tran, the actress that played Rose Tico, that she abandoned social media because she was bullied by right-wingers. That's the narrative that the left-wingers want to put out there. They endlessly regurgitate this stuff in article after article. But really, I've looked into it, and the only evidence I can find is that she seems to have just not been able to keep up with all the controversy going on Twitter. And Twitter is basically a toxic mess. Left-wing, right-wing, non-political. It's just a lot of people telling and yelling a lot of stuff to you. And it is a lot to keep up with, and it's overwhelming. And if you're not somebody that's used to that, that wants that, you're just going to delete your Twitter account. That's why I'm not on Twitter, because I'm not into that. And it's not about politics. It's just about how much time can I waste on people just yelling shit at me that I may or may not agree with. So that's what it really looks like to me. And everything I've looked into, that's all I can find on it. That she just quit because she wasn't into it. Maybe not everybody's into Twitter. They just don't want to hear everybody shout at them all day long. But let's read on. This article is a hack job, just one more in a long list of fan shaming. There won't be a new Fandom Menace. The current group of people that appreciate that Star Wars is doing just fine, or they appreciate what Star Wars was. Yeah, I'd say that's true. The Fandom Menace, people that consider themselves the Fandom Menace, they have always been into Star Wars, some of them since 1977. And yeah, they'll never not like that stuff from back in the day. It's the Disney trilogy that they have all the problems with, and it's not really a political thing. Yeah, maybe some of it is, but it's mostly just bad writing. It's bad writing, bad direction, and it's just whole lot of corporate nonsense. You know, corporations aren't set up to make art. That's why artists make art. Corporations come in and they buy up art, and they put licenses on art, and they merchandise art. But when has a corporation actually created original works of art? They don't. They're not set up for that purpose. They're set up to commercialize the art. So that's the big problem, really, in my opinion. Let's read on. And I don't know what world you live in where 1 billion is somehow a bad performance. Rise of Skywalker is among the top 20 highest box office returns. Yeah, did she make the argument that 1 billion wasn't? Yeah, she did. That, the box office was bad. No, the box office is not bad, but for a Star Wars film, for the big end game ending, so to speak, of a Star Wars trilogy, it is pretty disappointing. But a financial failure? No, it's not. Now, you can argue that maybe it'll be many more years before Walt Disney Company recoups their investment on Star Wars, because, yeah, just by the raw numbers that are publicly available, it looks like they're not really in the black yet on their entire investment, but they will be eventually, and this movie is certainly not a flop. But anyway, let's move on. The real reason it didn't make more is because fans that appreciate Star Wars the same way as the Fandom Menace does, we all checked out after The Last Jedi. That was the nail in the coffin. This article, like all the ones you parrot, is just throwing dirt on the casket. Yeah, well, before The Last Jedi, were we talking about this kind of stuff? Not exactly. Yes, people were savaging each other over the Star Wars prequels, insulting George Lucas, insulting each other, insulting each other's moms. That was before all the Disney stuff. Now, when the Disney stuff came, all of a sudden this went into a political direction. It wasn't before. Now, is that the direction that Disney wanted to take it? I'm suspecting it is. They thought that it would be good marketing to move it into the political realm, but it seems to have largely backfired. And again, that's why corporations aren't very good at creating art. They have really weird ideas that really blow up spectacularly when they try to commercialize works of art. But let's move on. What a stupid thing to write. The issue with Star Wars was the lousy writing, lousy character development, and lousy direction. So the problems. Rey was a Mary Sue, and we're not talking your regular Mary Sue. She was the most powerful Jedi in Star Wars history by such a large margin, all without any sort of training, that it was ludicrous even by Mary Sue standards. Finn was given the short shaft, including being made a bumbling fool in the second movie. Poe was given the shaft in the series, made into a hot-headed, bumbling idiot for most of it. Tico was a joke, and her whole character arc was a waste. Holdo was a joke, worst admiral ever. Akbar unceremoniously killed off. Leia turned into Mary Jedi Poppins. Luke was turned into a defeatist, cranky old man. And of course, the Kennedy crapped on the entire expanded universe and all the Star Wars canon, which was further crapped on by two clown directors who've managed to ruin every franchise they've gotten their hands on. And thanks to Jar Jar Abrams, the Star Trek reboot is on hiatus for the foreseeable future. Very well written, and I agree with most of this. And you know what the common denominator with this list of problems is? The characters were unlikable to a lot of people. They were not only in The Last Jedi. the characters were made unlikable to the majority of Star Wars fans in different ways. Some of those ways could be interpreted in a political light, but largely when you put a lot of unlikable characters together, I don't know of a movie that does it and succeeds unless it's a movie that's a parody, a satire. A movie that you're supposed to sympathize with the characters as heroes, like a hero's journey, an adventure. If the main characters are all unlikable in different ways to the bulk of the audience, you've got a big problem. And to me, that's the thing that all of these problems in this list have in common. You made characters, a lot of these characters were likable before, and then you made them unlikable. And I'm talking about new characters from The Force Awakens, not just the original series characters. They did that to all of the characters, their own characters. You know, was there any characterization of Rey? I mean, she's a Mary Sue, yes, by the definition of a Mary Sue, she fits it, and The Rise of Skywalker further cemented that. But you know, she wasn't likable or unlikable. She was neither. She was nowhere. She wasn't really a character. She was an empty like vessel that I guess the corporate executives at Disney thought that everybody would latch onto because there wasn't anything inside to offend anybody. I still don't know what she's about. I still don't know what her beliefs are. I don't know what her motivations are because they never gave us any. She's just an empty character. But let's move on. This article is an abomination. This article is truly horrendous. I marvel at the sheer stupidity and absurdity within your echo chamber that has managed to help formulate this article. I am appalled that this was released by the Washington Post, as I will now doubt the legitimacy of any articles published forthwith. If this managed to get past your editor, who knows what else in subjects I'm less knowledgeable of that you may pass off as truth while belatedly deceiving readers. This is abhorrent journalism, and I would like to now share with you a quote that I haven't dredged up in the better part of a decade. That's how horrific this article is. What you've just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul. And that's a quote from Billy Madison. It's quite apt, but you know, the main point I get out of this paragraph, this response to the article, is that this isn't a journalist. Washington Post and other outlets, in their attempt to keep up with what has happened with the internet and the decline of print journalism, they have moved into clickbait journalism, if you will. They have tried to do what the internet is much better at doing, and that's not by having somebody as a journalist come in and do things that a journalist would traditionally do. No, today's journalist, like this lady that wrote this article, is a political science professor. She is just an opinion. And what they do is they bring in people with credentials in certain fields, and then they label them as journalists and let them write these things and post them in places like the Washington Post. And then you're supposed to take them as a journalist. But I could slap the name journalist on myself just for making a video like this, and maybe I can trot out some credentials too that have nothing to do with Star Wars or nothing to do with political science, but I can give you credentials, and that will accomplish absolutely nothing. It won't establish me as a journalist. It won't mean that I have some kind of journalistic credibility, but that's what the Washington Post and many other outlets are doing. They're desperate. The New York Times does this too. Just pick some random professor of something at some place and just have them write something for you. Pay them or not, it doesn't matter how you do that. Just get it into print, and then they're a journalist, right? So again, I dispute the fact that this is a journalist. Just because you can put your opinion in writing coherently in English does not make you a journalist. And that goes for TV too. When you turn on CNN, just because there's a guy sitting there in $1 million studio, you think that's a journalist? The days of like real journalism are long gone, and some of that's because of the internet, and some of that is for a whole lot of other reasons that we can't divert into here because this video is going to be way too long. But let's read on a little bit. Another response from a day ago on this article in the Washington Post. I am a fan. I liked Rey. I was confused as to how she was so powerful. Am I sexist for asking that? I loved Maria from Metropolis, Scully. Kaylee, Zoe Washburn, Kara Thrace, Ripley, Leia, Sarah Connor, both Chani and Lady Jessica. I can go on and on listing great women characters who were well written and well defined by strong writers versus weak writing and handling who Rey was in TFA and TLJ. Again, I liked Rey. I wanted to learn more about her and see her challenged, taught, trained, and grow as Luke Skywalker did. That didn't happen. Why? We were handed an incomplete character, and then we were attacked when we questioned her. We are fans who have attended movies and read the books giving us the story of Luke Skywalker for decades, a vibrant and expansive history of established canon detailing the life of one of the greatest sci-fi heroes in Luke Skywalker and the wonderful characters surrounding him. When TFA comes out, no Luke, a very different Solo, and a sidelined R2, we fans were confused. R2 was Luke's buddy. He was by his side always. Now he's not. What's up with that? Han is a pirate again. He's not with Leia. This was one of the great live stories. Now it's over. Why? Then TLJ gives us a Luke who has abandoned the fight and hides on an island drinking sea monster juice. Of course we rejected that. Why wouldn't we? You'll be patted on the back for this article on Twitter, which is unfortunate because this validates angry feelings versus fans, but it's not the truth. This is your opinion and desire to paint fans in a negative light. Talk to us, understand the fans, try learning about the Luke we grew up with versus the one we were given, and maybe you'll understand us versus labeling us. That seems more fair, objective, and scientific. May the Force be with you, Bethany Lucina. Well, I agree with all that, but it's a lot of words. You're not going to convince this professor at this university because she's not trying to be a journalist and she's not trying to understand Star Wars. She's trying to find the right-wing boogeyman in the Star Wars universe. That's what she's here to do. If you give her a look at the Terminator franchise, she will also find a right-wing conspiracy there. There's no question about it. That's what she has to do. That's her job. So let's move on. Bethany, you're absolutely wrong. Right-wingers aren't the only people who don't like the Disney Star Wars movies. A far broader audience than right-wingers do not like these movies. To say contrary to this is to diminish them. The reason the Disney Star Wars movies are not well received is because the plot is lacking, the story is disjointed and convoluted, and the reasons are far too many to discuss here. It is a valid argument to criticize these movies for these things. Yes, the movies are pretty with great special effects, but a good movie is way more than visuals, and it is here where these movies fail. To any longtime Star Wars fan and anyone who understood what Star Wars used to be, this convolution is obvious. Yeah. Whole lot of words. I agree with it all, but again, you're not going to convince her. Yeah, it's more of the same. Really, it's here's a short one. I'll read that. Why is it always right wing, left wing? It's a movie about fictional characters, and it wasn't even very good because they brought Palpatine back for whatever reason, making the story of the first 6 movies pointless. Yeah, it's all about the story. The story failed. But people need to come in. It's their job to find a political angle. And again, that goes back to the problem with journalism. The Washington Post needs to do what the internet did on all the forums and the gossip rags. They're competing with those places for attention. They're competing with YouTube videos. They need to gin up some kind of controversy. And the best way to do that now that we're coming up on the 2020 election is to make it politics again. And the 2016 election was a blessing for these types of people. And the 2020 election is going to further pad their journalistic credentials, if that's what you want to label this, because it's just going to get worse as we get closer to the election, I'm sure. And Star Wars, I'm sure there's more material that's going to come out of Disney and the Star Wars, and I'm sure somebody's going to find some right-wing, left-wing angle in there. But most of the fans, like I said, most of the fans right now are engaged over whether or not the prequel movies were crap or whether they are good movies, and that is far more savage than this thing going on here. The true fight in Star Wars world is with the Phantom Menace, and I won't go into which side I'm on here. If there were time, I would, because I think that this is a far more entertaining battle. But let's read another one of these. I thought TLJ was crap and Rise of Skywalker was a mess. I still would have had a female Jedi lead, would have just written her better, paid more attention to existing lore, and tied the trilogy to the other 6 movies. Main problem they had was no plan. They basically made it up as they went along, so we have 3 disjointed movies from each other, and the best one was basically a remake, no passion, vision, just a money grab. Yeah, the least controversial film in the Disney trilogy in all ways is the first one, The Force Awakens. It's a whole long running time of just a very bland and boring remake slash reboot, soft reboot, if you will, of A New Hope. It was very safe, very bland. It's what you do when you're afraid of offending anybody, where you don't really know what you're dealing with, so you just want to put something out there. And it was effective. Disney made bank from it, but they got one chance, and no one's willing to put up with more of that, and that's why we're here. But again, I still say the big fight, it isn't this political story. The big fight is between people that disrespect and people that talk up or respect the Phantom Menace and the trilogy of prequels. And that fight is ongoing. This politics, it's just a left-wing professor doing what she does. And there's plenty of people responding to that. They're all basically saying the same thing, that it's not about how woke you are. It's about writing a decent story. It's the same thing we're seeing with Doctor Who. You can make it woke, you can make it diverse, but you still have to have a good story. Otherwise, people are going to move on. They want to be entertained. They don't want to be preached to. Where were we? I almost got lost. Back here, back at this big infamous page, 52 and 86. That's where this is going to stay. Do I think it's rotten? Well, you know what? I have to admit, I still haven't actually sat down and watched this in its entirety. And when I actually have a chance to, I'm going to do an actual proper rotten review. So this will have to tide myself and whoever else is watching over for a while. And I will see you on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.